In this video, we'll take a look at changing a cell's content. This is particularly useful since drawings and details and standards change, and you'll often need to edit or recreate the contents of a cell after its placement. Now, MicroStation offers two methods for editing a cell's contents. The first method treats the cell as a model, while the second method requires redefining a cell through the Cell Library dialog box. We're going to look at the model method first, but before we do, I need you to place several cells in the design. So if you would follow along with what I'm doing, that would be very nice. Now, right now, you can see I have the break cell in my personal cell library, and shared cells is off, so I see the location of the cell as being in the library. So I'm going to identify that cell for placement, and I'm going to place cells in the design. So I'll start the Place Active Cell tool, and I'll locate some cells. Now I'm going to use shared cells. Now again, we see the break cell, and again, its definition is in the library. The other three cells you see here are shared cells, which have been placed previously in this design, so their definitions reside in this drawing file. The break doesn't yet. So again, placement, place a cell, going to place 4 more. There's 4 more cells. Notice now that the location of the shared cell has changed to shared from library. In other words, the column of cells here have their definition in the drawing file, whereas this column of cells has their definition in the library. Now I can start to edit this cell. Now I'm going to go back to non-shared cells. So I'm looking at the break in the cell library. I'll click on that, and I'm going to right-click it and click on Open for Editing. What this will do is open the cell library file in the correct model for this particular cell. So we'll click on that. We swap out the design files. I'm going to move my cell box out of the way so we can see a little better. Now you might well see 4 views open. This is perfectly fine, and it's quite standard to see this. In 2D, it makes a little difference either way, since this is a flat 2D drawing. However, in a 3D drawing, if you're working with a 3D cell, you'd still see the 4 views, but now you would see different view arrangements and view orientations. We can go ahead and edit this cell now. So I'm going to use view 1, but it doesn't really matter which view I use in this case. So I'm going to select the elements, and I'm going to simply rotate them. And we'll rotate them 90 degrees. So there's my edited cell. I can now go back to my original design file, which is this one. There's my original cells. I'll bring the cell dialog box back onto the screen. Now I'm in the non-shared cells section. Here's my break, and look at the display. It shows the edited version of the cell, as it should do since the library version has changed. On the other hand, if I click on Use Shared Cells, my break item displays as the original unedited cell. And this is simply because the definition for the shared cell still remains in the drawing and has not been affected by the edit. And this is because there is no direct dynamic link between the shared cell and the library cell. Hence, it doesn't change. Now, at this point, you could place new instances of the edited cell in the drawing, provided that shared cells is off, and simply go through the regular cell placement process. However, of course, if you placed the cell with shared cells on, you would see exactly the same orientation as before. So we need to replace the cells that we've just placed with the new definition. Now, to do this, we're going to need another tool, and in this case, it's the Replace Cells tool. So click on that. Let's have a look at the Tool Settings window. We have 2 methods, Update or Replace. We're going to update the definition. Mode can be single or it can be global. And obviously the global option changes all cells of the same name in the design. We'll leave that at single. And we're using update because that will simply update a cell definition, whereas the replace method will replace one cell for another, and the other cell will have to have a different name from the existing name. So we're updating. So let's update the non-shared cells first. So I'm going to select this cell and data point to accept. And we now see the new definition. I can continue doing that with each of the cells, or I can use the element selection tool to make a selection set of the cells to change them, or I can use a fence. And then I would use the update tool to update the contents of the fence or the selection set. And again, the global option would change all of the cells with that name. Now let's see what happens when you try and update the shared cells, this column. So the tool is still running. Going to select one of these and data point to accept, and all the cells have changed to the new definition. This happens, of course, because each shared cell shares the same single definition contained in the model. When you redefine one of the shared cells, the stored definition is also changed, and therefore all shared cells with that name are redefined. So clearly you do have to be a little careful with this. This may or may not be what you want to do. The second method of changing a cell's content is similar to the models method, except that you use an instance of the cell to make the changes. An important note here is that for this method, you will need to delete the library definition of the cell, but you cannot do this if there are shared instances of the cell in the design. So the following steps assume that there are no shared instances of the cell that I'm about to place. Now, I'm not going to use the original double break line because there are shared instances of that. So while you weren't looking, I created a single break line, which looks like this. Here comes my cell. I'll place a couple of copies of that in there too. Now this is the cell that I want to edit the elements and recreate the cells. Now to do that, I must first drop the cell's contents. So I'll use this as the instance of the cell that I'm going to edit. So to drop the contents, we need to go to the drop element tool. Make sure that complex and shared cells are on. Select the cell, and that instantly drops the elements. And we can tell that because if we look, you'll see that these are individual elements. Now I'm going to make the changes to the actual cell itself. And again, I'm going to do a rotation. This time I'll use 45 degrees to differentiate it from the previous one. Here come my elements. There we go, that's done. Now these are still individual elements. Now before I go any further, I must delete the cell definition here, otherwise I won't be able to redefine it to the same name. So right-click on the single break line and delete. I will say yes to this because I want to delete the cell. The cell is gone. All I have left is the original edited double break cell. Now I can redefine this cell again. So I'll select it, apply the origin, and the Create button automatically becomes available. Click on Create. We'll give this a name. It has to be the same name in this case, so it will be single break. The description is not as important, but I will stick it in there anyway. And we'll create. Now we have our cell back again with the new definition. In the drawing, we have the original cell which has been edited, but these two cells with the same name and with the library definition haven't been changed. So now we need to go back down to the Replace Cells tool. We're going to update single, that one, and that one, and that one. So just to recap, what I did was to redefine that cell to its original name so that I could replace all the cells of the same name with the new definition. Now what I could have done, of course, is to edit that cell to the 45 degrees and simply give it a different name. And then I could place those cells in the design and leave the original ones behind. It really depends on what you need to do with a particular cell. Now, just a couple of notes along the same lines. You can delete a cell definition from the library simply by deleting its model in the cell file. That works quite well. And keep in mind that a shared cell definition that has instances in the design cannot be deleted from the design file. Only when you have deleted all instances of a shared cell can you then delete the definition that resides in the design file. Now, I'd like you to practice this, of course, but I would also like you to take a closer look at the Replace Cells tool by going to the Help system and looking at the information there. There are quite a number of options, and rather than me simply talk at you, it would be best if you did a little research on that tool. So, as usual, the simplest way to do that is with the Replace Cells tool highlighted, just press F1 and the help files for that particular tool will be displayed.